Hello, I'm Tanya, and I'm breaking every conceivable rule which I have for myself about how I'm supposed to make videos, including the lighting, and I'm using a cell phone camera. Okay, excuses aside, I do actually have a professional setup. I'm just not going to set it up right now. I want to actually use this video as a chance to do a practice round on a specific subject. Oh yeah, another thing, don't wear black, don't wear red. Another thing you're not supposed to do in videos. Sorry, ADHD, I get distracted. Okay. I want to use this as a practice round for a series of videos which I need to make, and also for some conference presentations which I need to do, and seminar presentations. One of the topics that I'm going to be talking about over the next, I don't know if I get around to it or whatever, period, will be about the United Nations Convention for the Right of People with Disabilities. This is an important, what would you say, document, set of what do you call it, rules. See, I'm making this up as I go along, didn't take notes. A set of undertakings, that would probably be a better word for it, in respect of people with disabilities, or disabled people, depending on which form you want to use of the word. Many countries which belong to the United Nations have signed this undertaking, so by signing this they are obliged to implement the things that they signed to. These things include creating awareness of disabilities, of the rights of people with disabilities, and doing things like passing laws and supporting all sorts of activities to give disabled people a better chance in life. Right, this is important because whereas we may, as disabled people, go through a lot of arguments about why we should be respected, why people should listen to us, why, you know, don't cast us aside, whatever it is that we're trying to say, we also need to know that we have this undertaking by many of our governments to support these rights. And if they don't want to do it, and if they don't want to pass the laws, and if they don't want to listen to disabled people speaking about themselves, they're actually in violation of the undertaking which they made to the United Nations. Now, there is a kind of escape clause in this too. So governments can decide, I don't like this anymore, I don't like disabled people, let's get rid of all of them, in which case they actually have to leave. They have to say that I no longer support this undertaking. So while they are still saying that, okay, we've signed to this thing, then they are obliged to follow it. So some of the provisions which are in there are things which might be quite obvious. There are things like, if you are going to be talking about disabled people, you need to include them in that conversation. Those things are provided for by specific clauses. They're also provided for by the descriptions of what communication means. You know, like if you can't communicate using speech and the conventional means which other people, you know, the majority of people perhaps can use, then you need to be provided with a way of communicating, and society is obliged to provide you with that and to make provision for you. You can't just leave you on your own and say, okay, you're different from us and we don't care about you and about your needs. They actually have to provide that. And there's a description of that. There's a description of, or at least there's some examples of that. It could be Braille, it could be assistive and augmentative communication methods, like typing, for example, sign language, and so on. Those are some of those provisions. Also, in the texts that surround this convention, by the way, the reason why my eyes are looking all over the show is because I can't quite figure out where on earth the camera is on this device. Okay, so where was I getting to? Okay, yeah. In the conversation around this convention on the United Nations website, we will find references to well-known principles in disability rights, such as the principle of nothing about us without us. This is an old principle, nihil de nobis sine nobis, I think it is in Latin, and it applies to any stakeholder group where decisions are going to be taken by a government or by a group of people in power related to those people. So if you're gay, if you are a female, if you are black, and you've got then people who are not gay and people who are not female and not black making decisions about you, you're supposed to actually be empowered to take part in those conversations and to make decisions about your own destiny. The same thing goes with being disabled. Disability is seen, according to the convention, something in line with the social model of disability. what that actually says is you may be disabled because you were injured, something bad happened to your body. You may be disabled because your body is in some way, or your mind or so on, is just different from other people's. And, you know, there could be all sorts of reasons. But what is actually additionally disabling is if society doesn't make provisions for you to exercise your rights. And that's what the social model of disability is all about. It's saying that society can often put obstacles in our way, and so it's society as a whole that's responsible for the disabled people in the community. That then tells us that the onus is not on us to become as good as everybody else, to prove our worth, to show, you know, how we can overcome our disability and how non-disabled we can be, but to actually say, well, this is the way that I am, and of course I'm going to try as hard as possible to live a great life, but it's not up to me on my own. That in a way can be used, or at least it's a powerful backdrop for some of the arguments that we need to make in respect of how we are treated when people come along with wacko therapies, or when they say we're going to do research your condition, but you know, you might be saying, I don't want that research money spent on this aspect of my condition. I would like the research money to be spent on a different way of supporting people like me, for example. Those are some of the things that make the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities a really great document, a great thing for us to refer back to. Now, let's just look at this for a moment and where we can raise these issues. These issues can be raised, for example, when you are talking to an organization which claims to represent your disability, or when you're going to a conference which addresses your disability. So disability, just remember, is actually a combination of things, and the concept is still evolving in according to the convention, but basically what it means is something about you is different. It might be a medical problem, it may just be some other kind of difference, which, you know, your body, your way of which your mind works or something like that is different about you. And the society in which you live is not supporting you as fully as it could be for you to participate fully in that society. So, conference about your condition, and it's organized by a whole lot of people who don't have the same condition as you do, they don't have the same disability, and they will say what's a great idea, and you know how people like you should be treated and what the therapy should be. This is where you can call on the United Nations Convention and you can say, hey, wait a minute, I need to be included in that, or somebody who represents my views should be included in that. Not just as a token representative, but actually having your voice elevated as the main voice. After all, if we're going to have a conference about women, we don't want to have 100 men and 1 woman. We want to have mainly women there, and maybe we'll have a man as a guest. You can take that particular analogy down a whole lot of arguments and channels and so on to say, well, when is somebody a man, when are they a woman? This thing is actually a lot more fluid, and it's perhaps not a great analogy. Some people don't feel that I should be using that particular one. Some people are non-binary, so they don't identify as one specific gender. So the man-woman dichotomy is not necessarily perhaps the best metaphor either, but you get what I'm going at. It's the group which is being spoken about needs to have representation. Now, on that note, if I can just continue it for a little while at the risk of getting myself into hot water with using this analogy, there was actually it really did happen. There was a conference on women's rights in Saudi Arabia some years ago, and every single participant was a man. That may seem very weird to people living in the Western world, where generally women's rights are in a better shape than in a conference like that, but it is the way that some disabilities get dealt with in conferences. We often will have autism conferences, and then maybe they'll kind of invite an autistic person to come and tell their story as if they are the zoo exhibit, which is talking about itself, and then everybody else goes on, and then they say, see, you know, we're doing such a good job over here. So this is where the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities becomes an important document to go back to say that it can't just be tokenism like that. We can't just have an autism organization representing autistic people and then, you know, there's like no autistic person, or, oh, you know, maybe we should get some autistic people to be on the committee or the board or something like that, just to legitimize ourselves. It actually has to be autistic led. Otherwise it's an organization about autism, which is fine. You could have, in fact, I've just seen today is the day on which they have, I think it's called the 100 Men March, which is a march done by men in support of women's rights and against women's abuse. Cool, you know, that kind of thing is fine, and it's really good, and it's good to have allies, but we have to be sure that we realize that we're talking then about allies, and that the organization is an ally organization, or the event is allies. It does not represent women, just as such conferences and such organizations don't represent the views of autistic people. In such organizations, in such events, we also have to take a look at mandates. What a mandate means is somebody has said, yes, I would like you to speak on my behalf, or yes, I'm okay with you doing this for me or about me. Very often organizations are not mandated by the people they claim to represent. Now, there are times when I would like somebody to speak for me. I don't have the time to spend going out and representing myself, and I might get somebody to represent me and my interests who isn't from my group, as it were. So I might get a man to be my attorney, for example, if I want to be represented in a court of law about somebody who's done something to me. I might get somebody who is, you know, younger than I am to speak about my rights as an older person, and I'm in my 50s, so I can choose that. But it does then need to be done by choice, and it has to be done by delegation. There are some instances in which it's just impossible for people to speak for themselves. They may be completely paralyzed, they may be non-speaking, and no reliable way of communication, no reliable means of assistive communication has been found for that person. And then we must make a couple of assumptions about what they might need, what might be good for them. In such cases, it's very important to speak to other people who are able to communicate and who share some things with that person in common, to ascertain what some of their needs may be. They may have distinctly different opinions about things. These people may have different beliefs, different religion, different things that, that interests them, different people that they care about. But we do get a good idea of what we need to look at in terms of their disability by looking at other people who can communicate with us about those disabilities. I'll give you an example. I cannot speak authoritatively about what it's like to be non-speaking as an autistic person, because although I have lost speech at times, and I must tell you, it's very strange, it's a very odd experience for somebody, you can see I speak very fast, to not speak at all, and to just have sounds coming out like that's what happens, or be totally silent for 2 days. So I can only relate from that perspective, but then I go back slowly to speaking again. I don't know what it's like to not be able to speak at all. So there I take very careful note of those people, what people say, using letterboards, using typing, using writing, about their experience of what it's like to be constantly non-speaking. And it's important for me as an activist for the rights of disabled people who do not speak to convey their words and not to make my opinions of what those words should be too strong over that. I'll give you an example. As an autistic, I don't see autism as a disorder for myself per se. That's not to say that every autistic feels the same way. My view on autism is very neutral. It's not a gift, it's not a disorder, it's a neurological phenomenon, and there are some aspects of it which can be very disabling for some people. There's some aspects of it which are problematic, and there's some which can be useful. So I take a very neutral stance on that. But if I read the writing of someone like Ido Kedar, who is a non-speaking autistic, and he types now to communicate, he used to point to a letterboard, he writes about this certainly as being a disorder and as being very inconvenient to him and something that, makes his life difficult. And I don't want to argue with that, because that genuinely is his experience, and it's his experience of something which is very different from my life and very different from my experience. In fact, what he even says about his condition is this thing should actually have a different name, because if he takes a look at, he met somebody who can interact, speak with tone as I'm speaking now, and who has very superficial similarities to him. And why are both these things called autism? Because the main problem he has is with movement and coordinated movement. Really, that thing that he has, is, according to him, should have then a different name, or the thing which the other person has should have a different name. But so those are words which I like to elevate, because that's genuinely his experience and it's different from mine. And I agree that the thing which he has requires a name, because autism is just too broad to describe that experience of movement difficulties, which are not adequately explained by terms like ataxia or apraxia, because they manifest differently in someone like Ido and in many other autistics. Right, okay, then there'd be instances where I can genuinely say, yeah, I could speak, at least I could represent some of the potential opinions of somebody, for example, who suffers from sensory overstimulation, even if they don't speak. I have suffered from that myself. It's really, really debilitating, and I can with confidence say that some of the therapies which are used for people who are in this state are bad. They're really bad for them. They're harmful. They traumatize people. And there I would, kind of like to stick up for other people's experience, especially since many non-autistic people who have described what that experience is like for them have also explained experiences which do correlate with my own and with the experiences of other autistic people who do speak and who can communicate more comfortably in words. So that then, I think I'll wrap it up over there. And if my eye contact is all over the show at the moment, it's not due to my autism. It's in this case due to me having no clue how this camera actually works. So sorry if I've been looking offline. I've been looking all over the place. If it was due to me being autistic, then then I'll say live with it, because that's the way that some people are if they're autistic. Looking straight at a camera or looking straight at straight at somebody who's they're talking to is not that comfortable for them, and that's to be respected as well. Okay, so much for my practice round. Let's see how it goes.